Our mutual aid fundraiser for this video is benefiting Haneen and Bassam. Haneen and Bassam are a young couple in Gaza who are struggling to piece their lives back together in the wake of the genocide being carried out against Palestinians. Haneen and Bassam need at least $500 a month to make rent on their home, which enables them to have greater shelter and comfort than they would if they were living in a tent. They also need money for food, essential items, and medical supplies. Full disclosure, I, Esther, run the Chuffed page for Haneen's fundraiser. Because Chuffed doesn't operate in occupied Palestine, Haneen needs an international partner to help her collect funds. I transfer funds to Haneen once or twice a month, depending on what we raise, and all funds go directly to Haneen and Bassam. You can donate at the link in the video description or visit https://chuffed.org/project/Haneen-and-Bassam. Thank you for your generosity and free Palestine. Numinous Productions presents Anti-Zionist Jewish Voices in TTRPGs, a Games for Gaza panel. Hello, and welcome to another Games for Gaza panel. I am your host, Esther Wallace. I use she and she pronouns. And if you're tuning into this, you probably know who I am, but maybe you don't. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce myself really briefly. I do a lot of things in the tabletop RPG space. I am a game designer working at the pace of disabled time, so my games come out very infrequently, but I work on them. I can say now that I've written for Paizo, which is really exciting. And I host a bunch of podcasts. I'm the GM of Chromythica, a Pathfinder 2e show. And I have recently started this, actually, where you're going to be viewing or listening to this, Numinous Productions, which is an endeavor to do a lot of cool things in the space with a lot of cool people, actual play, conversations like this, more stuff too. So that's a little taste of what I do. I'm going to hand it over to my fabulous guest, and I'm going to go with the window right below me. So I'll invite Gwen if you want to go next.
Hi, my name is Gwen or Lecto. I use she, her pronouns. I do a number of things in the tabletop RPG space. I do performance, voice acting, I do game design as well, and I also do marketing strategy. I am the marketing strategist over at Tender Vicious Studios. Keep an eye over there for some things coming out very soon. And I am very excited to be here. Actually, I think this is like the first time I was able to be on anything like this. I think I've been too busy every single time that I've been asked. So excited to be here. I will pass the torch over to David.
Hi, I'm David. What is things that I do? No, I'm currently working on a Delicious in Dungeon themed OSR with Plus One Games. I am also, if you've played any of Banana Chan's solo games and they came with a soundtrack, I probably composed that or composed a piece of that. And I am currently working on a piece for, oh my God, Rascal. Can't believe that slipped my brain. Yeah, and I am also a labor organizer and an organizer in the pro-Palestine movement, specifically within Jewish anti-Zionist organizations, doing work in that space. Although I have taken a little bit of a step back from that to do some other labor organizing stuff. Oh, and I am currently fundraising for a family in Gaza right now who are currently trying to set up shop outside of in the wreckage of their own home to like start to sift through stuff. I will include where you can find the link to that at the end of this. Yeah, I'll pass it to. I'm so sorry. Can you tell me how to pronounce your name?
Pretend the I isn't there. It's Jen. Hi.
Yeah, great. Thank you. I thought that was right, but I really didn't want to screw it up.
Really, you could go GN, but really that's more of the more syllables my name has, the angrier my mother is at me. So Jen is perfect. Hi, friends. I am Jen. My pronouns are they, she. By day, my day job is a software QA engineer. However, when I am not doing software QA, I spend a lot of time in the actual play space and the TTRPG space doing performance, production, project management. Unfortunately, the fourth one is not a P, it's overlay design. One day I will figure out how to make it super alliterative. Most of my work you can find over at Girls Run These Worlds, which is basically just kind of like a femme identifying focused TTRPG actual play space. And yeah, that's pretty much me. I have two cats who you will probably see at least one of at some point during this. And from a sudden forgetfulness of anything I've ever done in my life, I will pass it back over to Esther.
Awesome. Well, if more relevant things come up, you can interrupt and tell us. That's totally cool. So, yeah, I wanted to start our conversation off by asking all of us to just briefly describe our experience coming into Judaism and coming into anti-Zionism. And I'm happy to go first because I was actually not born Jewish. The word conversion holds a lot for me, and I don't typically use it. I like to say I became Jewish, but I might go shorthand convert sometimes in this discussion. So just so folks know that. Yeah, I was raised in a very conservative evangelical Christian environment that was not great for many, many reasons. But I had a lot of experience being exposed to Christian Zionism through churches, through my grandparents who were like kind of intense Christian Zionists, I now realize. And it was really in the atmosphere growing up. I rarely, if ever, heard the word Palestine, but we talked a lot about Israel and the reasons Israel needed to exist for kind of fucked up purposes in Christianity. Actually, we can maybe get into that later. But that was kind of my introduction to Zionism. I fell away from Christianity as a late teenager around college, that form of it anyway, and spent a long time kind of trying to figure out my place spiritually. I wound up at a Unitarian Universalist Divinity School, Star King School for the Ministry in Oakland, really cool place. And there I had the chance to take a class on anti-Zionism, Jewishness, and diaspora, which was taught by a Jewish person who had really thought about this. I had a couple of really amazing Jewish professors and some experiences in classes there that called me into Jewishness. So right now, I would say my path is Jewishness and I identify as Jewish. I went through that process. But I also hang out a lot in Unitarian Universalist spaces. So if you ever hear me described as a Jewish Unitarian Universalist, that's cool too. And it's very difficult to describe what Unitarian Universalism is, so I'm not going to try to do it right now. If anybody's curious, message me somewhere. So yeah, that's me.
Yeah, so my experience is a little strange. So I was sort of raised Jewish, as in on my mother's side of the family. She was Jewish and she was raised Jewish. My father was not. So my parents came to the conclusion to not specifically raise any of their kids in any particular religion, and more was like, we will take you to whatever we're doing and you can go explore whatever your friends are doing, and we're not going to tell you how to do anything, and if anything resonates with you, we'll support you through that, even if it's not something that we do, which I did appreciate. I did have the chance when I was very young to go and experience a lot of different organized religions, and over the years I found that most of them are not for me. That being said, I was more heavily raised Jewish just because of my mother's side of the family, and my grandparents were very very about it. So most of my experience comes from there. The thing that I wish was a little different in me being raised that way is that, in hindsight, was that I never actually truly learned anything about Judaism. It was just sort of like, oh, well, just come along. And it was kind of the thing of like expecting your child to ask questions when they don't know what questions to ask. Like, I'm a child, I don't know. Like, I'm just going along with things. And then the sort of unfortunate reality of, getting a bit older and having my own opinions on things, and then losing pretty much all of that side of my family aside from my mother. I have no more elders to go to talk about any of the traditions that I did with them now that I can understand them. And kind of similarly, when I went through college, coming out of college, I had a pretty lack of spiritual practice and like any sort of anything in that realm. And it wasn't until the height of the lockdown that I actually turned to finding that, because I needed something. And I ended up finding sort of like my own and developing my own practices outside of a lot of other influences. But around that time also, my parents decided to do a like a 23andMe or something test for themselves just because they wanted to. And my mother was adopted, which is like kind of the big thing, the reason why she wanted to do that. And I figured, like, I know that my mother is Ashkenazi, but I found out that she's also very largely Sephardi. And I didn't know what that meant. So I went to go look it up and I was like, wow, I don't know anything about where I come from or like any cultural religious backgrounds that like my family comes from. And that was something that now that I have my own spiritual practices, I felt a sense of like loss that I didn't get to connect with that. And then now, kind of in the present day, in the most recent years, it's been really hard to reconnect with that because of everything that's happening right now in Gaza and all of these just Zionism being very loud right now. And so now I'm in this position of I'm not even sure if I trust myself to find information that is not leaning in that direction. And I am now, after the lockdown, very anxious to talk to people sometimes in general, and now very anxious that I might be speaking to somebody who is trying to put Zionist ideologies out there when I am, I don't know very much. And I've lost all of that innate connection that I have with my family about it. So that's my weird position and that's my experience. So that's where I'm at right now.
I am sorry that you are not able to find more of a connection, or that it's hard given everything going on right now. But I will say, I am glad that it is something you are seeking, and I hope you find it. But
Yeah, I do too.
For in terms of my own experience, I grew up. So my dad is not Jewish, and my mom is Jewish. I was raised Jewish, but there's all kind of at every stage in my like trajectory, there were some things that rubbed me the wrong way. And one of the first ones was my parents tried to join a temple in LA called Valley Beth Shalom as like a family membership. And they said, sorry, but your husband's not Jewish. You and your kids can join, but you can't join as a family. We wound up joining Stephen S. Weiss, which was on like the Reform to Orthodox, or really Reconstructionist to Orthodox continuum, was more towards the like less strict end of things. But Stephen S. Weiss is also one of the first Reform Zionists, so take that with a grain of salt when it comes to Palestine. I, went to a Jewish day school from elementary school, learned Hebrew at this Jewish day school, very much a Zionist environment, although also LA has the largest Iranian population outside of Tehran, like literally even than any other city in Iran. And there were a lot of people whose family had come, during the uprising in the 70s. And so our school was really a like 50-50 split of like Ashkenazim and Sephardim. There, I mean, it was frankly, it was my first experience witnessing like racism, witnessing like cultural bias, that there were absolutely forces of Ashken normativity at play. And I was very struck by that as a kid. But that did not I did not question my Zionism until really until I got to college. My first week, I was having a conversation with someone who, she knows who she is, and I was horrible to her. I was very staunchly Zionist. I wound up posting a PragerU video to her Facebook. Yeah, I'll like own the that shame for the rest of my life. And then she was like, I'm not gonna even argue with you, but you should look into who they are and what they do. And that really started me down this rabbit hole of like, why am I agreeing with these horrible people? What is it about this stance that aligns with what they want from the world? And, through that, I was able to really unpack that difference, especially since October 7th. I have been really seeking anti-Zionist Jewish voices. Works like Shaul Magid's The Necessity of Exile have been like a huge source of affirmation on that front. But just to Gwen's point, like it's scary right now to like I find myself coming up with, I'll use a very Jewish term for it, a shibboleth, which has its origins in ancient Hebrew, coming up with shibboleths to see where someone is going to fall on that continuum, because it has become this thing where, like, if you're not careful, conversations can turn venomous so quickly, and that's really sad. I'll pass it to Jen.
Cool, cool. So my religious upbringing was a bit of a mishmash. My mother is Japanese, my father was Jewish, so I technically, if you ask the real sticklers for the Jewish rules, I don't count, but also I do count, so screw them. I am what I like to semi-affectionately call myself, a Jorman. I was raised both Jewish and Mormon. I am what the kids call culturally Jewish, in that I don't keep kosher, I don't read Torah, I never went to any Jewish day school or anything, just because like the primary custodial arrangement was with my Mormon mother. But the custodial arrangement had made sure that my father had me for really all of the high holidays, like Passover, Yom Kippur, like Hanukkah, we didn't get all 8 days, but we got a couple of days, like that kind of thing. And one of the biggest things that my family always told me, and I've kind of touched on this already, is that, yeah, my mother is not Jewish. That does not mean I am not Jewish. I come from a Jewish family. I participated in all the Jewish traditions. I dipped my pinky in wine and put it on a plate. I ate the horseradish, all that stuff, as much as I hated it. And as far as questioning Zionism goes, I didn't know to question Zionism. For a very long time, I didn't even know what Zionism meant. The Jewish side of my family, my dad's side of the family, was always the kind of people where I got pushed on a playground once, so I can punch everybody in the face who disagrees with me. AKA, hi, I'm Israel. And to kind of touch a little bit on the concept of Zionism, what I was always told by my family, and what I was told by Google and all of the search engines and all the books that I really ever read by Zionist people, obviously, was that the Zionism is the right to a homeland. On the surface, that sounds really fucking reasonable, and I'm like, yeah, totally. And then once I started kind of going into college, once I started actually looking into things a little bit more, obviously going from a relatively small public school in Albany, New York, to a fairly large private institution with, a whole lot of resources for higher education, I came into contact with a lot of different people. And I, similarly to David, I will always wear this as a bit of a badge of shame. My family brought me up to be Islamophobic as hell. Every time we would pass someone wearing a hijab, or even someone who was brown, for example, like they would cringe, they would steer me away, they'd be like, oh, be careful. Every time, God forbid, I got on a flight with literally anyone with a head covering, they'd be like, oh, I'm like, yeah, y'all, come on. And when October 7th happened, obviously, just under a year and a half ago, things kind of took a turn for the worse. I never really understood why my family was always, oh, I like this, you know which actress. I like this actress, she's Jewish. And I'm like, I don't understand what the big deal is because, there's a lot of Jewish people out there. What they meant was she's a Zionist. October 7th happened. I had already agreed to go home for Thanksgiving. And at the time I was in Japan, so I didn't actually have that much internet access. I didn't know what had happened for a couple of weeks. So luckily, I missed all of the initial, oh, poor Israel, right? Which I consider myself lucky because I, you know, and I am lucky enough to actually work with someone who is Palestinian, who has Palestinian family. And I got to kind of hear her perspective, her family's perspective, her worry, her anguish for all of her family, both in LA and in Palestine. And I realized, oh my God, this whole self-determination thing is really just let's expel all of the people who already lived here so we can claim this fictional story written by people who just really wanted this land for some reason. Thanksgiving was very uncomfortable, as you might imagine, especially a month and a half after the events of October 7th, spending a holiday with super Zionist Jewish family. Very, very uncomfortable. My aunt picked me up from the airport. I flew home, and by the time we'd gotten home, I had come this close to being like, turn around and take me back to the airport, please. because literally before we even had finished the 20-minute drive home, she'd already gone off on, oh, civilian casualties happen. Fuck you. And then shortly afterwards, I had planned a trip in April back to New York to my family, and I texted her and I was like, I can't come home. I'm sorry. Like I cannot sit here and listen to you all support this genocide. She calls me. I tell her that out loud. She hangs up on me. I have not spoken to most of that family since then. So it's been actually just about a year now. David, I think you mentioned things turning ugly very quickly when you try and kind of confront people about this. I haven't talked to my dad in just about a year now. Can confirm that is what happens. But I do consider myself lucky because I have figured out that that is what my family is like. I have gotten myself more educated. I have read more. I have actually spoken to people. I have either read people's articles or spoken to people who have studied this stuff. Yes, I have lost a fairly significant portion of my family. I consider it more important to be informed and supporting the right causes. And yeah, that is how I ended up here today.
If I could just jump into what you said about the holidays and the immediate aftermath of that, you reminded me that October 7th happened the same day as my cousin's wedding. It is a gay Jewish wedding, and I was so excited for it. And my brother and his wife did not talk to me or hug me or say a word to me the whole night. And I found out it was because my spouse had like reposted JVP's statement in the aftermath. And to them, it was appalling that anyone would dare bring in context, and that was like insensitive somehow, and that insensitivity was enough to treat family like a stranger. I say that to say that like it is something that I think a lot of Jewish people of conscience right now are figuring out is, what does family look like in this? How do you hold your morals, and who do you choose? You simply can't be around anymore.
Yeah. And like one thing that's super important is that there are people out there who have the privilege and have the ability to be able to do what I did and step away from my family. I am lucky enough to be financially independent. I am lucky enough to be able to look at my family and say, screw you, screw this. I don't have to deal with it. One important message that I do want to impress is, if you do not have the luxury, if you do not have the privilege of being in a position where you cannot cut off that family, not your fault. And you do not have to put yourself in a dangerous position to do so. You can, it's obviously very difficult to be able to, like stomach that for yourself. It should not be a source of guilt.
I think along those lines, I think it can be really hard when the people in your life are going through what is, for all intents and purposes, re-traumatization, right? You're told this horrible thing happened to us. This is what we need to make it never happen again. And to recognize, and I think it's fair to say we probably all have some degree of trauma as the people on this call, and to recognize what a like being triggered from that trauma place looks like, and also to know that like you're still ultimately accountable for your actions that come from that place, and both desperately wishing that they could hear you and knowing that they may not be able to.
This brought up a story I'd like to relate from my mother, actually. We have a very difficult relationship on my side. I don't really know what she thinks of it because she has very strong reality filters, as we call them. I'm an only child, so I feel it has been harder for me to totally cut off my family over the years, even though I've had some very good reasons to. After October 7th, I was like, well, I'm so curious what my parents' response to this is going to be. And we got into it on a phone call one day. I don't even remember how we got there, but we did. And I made this very passionate, and I hope compassionate case to my mom of like, this is why this matters. This is why you really need to care. This is the context. And what she said was so revealing to me about her, but about a lot of people's broader responses. She said, I know this is horrible, but I just don't care about those people. And I was like, yeah, Mom, that is horrible. That is really awful. And also, it was very, very insightful for me. And so I carry that with me in so many conversations and so many spaces that I'm in, whether it's Jewish or Unitarian or Christian or what be it, of like, oh, a lot of people just don't care about Palestinians. And like, how to even undo that? Like, is it possible to undo that? Is it worth to spend the energy there as opposed to putting it towards other parts of fighting for liberation? Like, all of those questions come to mind. And I just wanted to put that out there that I've been holding that. And I really resonate with family being a tough spot.
My mom said some genocides are worse than others, was the similar but different comment.
Ooh.
That's rough. That's a rough one.
Look, it's genocide.
I think it was kind of profound to hear her accept that it might be and
Yeah.
still not have that move the needle.
Yeah. And also, I'm going to be honest, at the point where it turns into a genocide, there is no worse than others. It's whether it's 10%, whether it's 90%, whether, the intent is there. And unfortunately, with countries like Israel who have the power to complete, it's not just about the numbers. It's about the intent. It's about the systems of power that have put them in that spot.
I was actually gonna say that like my experience is a little different with my family in that I'm in this weird, it's always weird, the spot of I have gotten to a point with my family on a number of different issues where it is difficult to bring anything up to them because I know that kind of similarly is just they will not ever be informed enough, and that is a choice that they make. So anytime that I will bring up any issue, really, it will be, well, just don't know about that, or I'm just too old to know about that. And it's just like, you're actually exactly the correct age to know about this. And it does discourage me from trying to have conversations with my parents, among many other things. So this in particular has been yet another thing where it's just like, well, I do not talk to my parents very much in general, just because this has been built up. And this is just another thing where I know where I stand, and I know that my parents will never be informed enough because they don't care enough, which is unfortunate because it makes me have no desire to reconnect with my family in that capacity. It has to be through a filter. It has to be kind of not the most authentic, which is hard. It's not the same as having to cut off family, but it is a different flavor of I am no longer present, and they are no longer present in my life in some capacity. And I think also, David, there was something that you said about being re-traumatized by all of this. I'm sure, we all share the experience of like really learning about what had happened during like the Holocaust, and then seeing it happen again is wild. And like my specific experience of where I don't have Jewish community around me in like this weird bubble that I'm in where I lost my chance for having like familial connection, and I'm just now starting to find other people around me. It was just really lonely, and it was really hard to be like, wow, why are people this off? Like, it's happening again, and we're pretending it's not just because it's a different people. Like,
Or worse,
why is
cheering
that
it on.
happening? Yeah, worse, even worse, people are cheering it on, and it's just like, well, this has already happened, and people are like acting like, oh, well, this is different. I'm like, no, it's not. It's not at all,
People say,
actually.
"Oh, I never stand by and let this happen," except you are. You are actively standing by and letting this happen.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
and the language that I used to talk about it in a poem I'd written was reliving their own extermination in the second person. Like it is this anything short of of acknowledging that is what it is, that it is genocide, I think fails to capture the, like, there are very few things that are morally absolute, but I think genocide is one such more morally absolute line.
And like honestly, even even putting aside the fact that there is no resistance without violence, and, even putting aside the fact that, from what I understand, so many of the casualties of October 7th were in fact inflicted by Israel itself. Even putting all of that aside, 1,200 does not compare to the tens, hundreds of thousands of people that have been displaced or killed or hurt. I'm sorry, it just doesn't.
Yeah, I mean, there were something like 900 Palestinian children every single year were being incarcerated. The idea of like, I'm sorry, if a foreign government took children out of your home and held them in a cell without charge or cause for a year, you would not call that imprisonment. You would not call that being arrested. They are being held hostage. The only difference is terminology at that point. And
Yeah.
um,
And it's Israel, so they can do whatever they want.
maybe this is a good segue into what Esther brought up about Christian Zionism and the like get out of jail free card that Israel gets from the broader Christian community. But I will let Esther choose the exact inroad into that.
Yeah, there was a couple things that got brought up for me, and then I'm happy to go down that inroad. There's Jasbir Puar's book, The Right to Maim, I believe talks a lot about Palestine as a specific case study of people being maimed on purpose and disablement as a tool of genocide. And that's why for me as a disabled person, like Palestine matters on so many dimensions. But the degree of disability that is inflicted on Palestinian people by weaponry, by mass starvation, by lack of medical treatment is really staggering. And so that came up for me. I was also thinking about how, as somebody raised Christian and then who came to Judaism, the books that I read, not usually the ones that my teachers recommended because they were pretty anti-Zionist, but like the ones that friends would recommend or you'd pick up in a bookstore. It's amazing that the way the Shoah, the Holocaust, gets talked about and the way that the state of Israel gets framed, because there are books that literally tell you, oh, you'll know you're Jewish when you start having nightmares about being put on a train in the Shoah. Like, I've read that in a book somewhere. And what an interesting framing of what it means to be Jewish. That's a whole other conversation we could have. That's a whole thing right there. But also, they would say things like, it is a Jewish responsibility to support the state of Israel. And to be Jewish, you need to make a commitment, and you will be asked about this at your Beit Din. Like, you're going to be quizzed on it. So to become Jewish, know your commitment ahead of time and have it like really explicitly written out. And this is one of the reasons I did things in a very radical way, because I was like, I can't say that. I can't say that if I'm going to become Jewish. I can't say that I support the state of Israel. And if somebody's going to be like, we fail you, I don't know what to do. And my teachers were like, we'll find people who will be cool. But it was just really stunning to me to see that framed as, to become Jewish, you need to, one, internalize this trauma that is maybe not in your particular family lineage to the point that you dream about it, and then to go inflict it on someone else. Like, what the fuck is that about? To be plain, like, what the fuck is that about? So yeah, now that being said, happy to get into Christian Zionism because that's a whole thing. I will do my two line boil it down, and if others want to chime in, please do. The way I grew up understanding Christian Zionism is the land of Israel needs to exist because it's a harbinger of the end times. We want Jesus to come back, and it needs to exist so Jesus can come back, and then everybody can either be Christian or will go to hell. That's it in a nutshell, what I got taught growing up. And there are many, many millions of people. I see this statistic cited a lot, and I don't know like the exact source for it, but that there are more Christian Zionists in the world than there are Jews in the world, period. And that is like a really staggering thing to me. So yeah, feel free to take it anywhere. Christian Zionism is fucked up. It's a huge factor in like the political support for Israel, for the arms we send them, for a lot of things.
I mean, honestly, one thing that you mentioned a minute ago about this process of, dreaming about being on a train, inflicting this trauma on other people. It's giving this idea of, I'm never going to straight up say Jews are safe. That's not something that I can say because I don't know and it's likely not true. But I feel like inflicting that kind of trauma on people is a way to keep them scared and keep them in that fight or flight and hope that they choose fight. And that's kind of fucked up, honestly.
There's a great Naomi Klein quote about the difference between remembering, which quite literally, as the word is constructed, is making yourself whole, and this like desire to keep people in a shattered state on the verge of outrage.
Not only Israel can save you.
I want to leave room for Gwen before I jump in with something else.
I don't have much to say about this particular topic in general. This is learning for me because I learned very quickly in my weird upbringing that Christianity in all its forms was not for me. So I didn't actually get to learn too much about individual or the large sweeping ideologies because and just within the organizations that I had experienced personally, maybe if I had experienced different ones, I would have felt differently. But I immediately felt a sense of like, you don't like these people a little too much. And sometimes these people is me. So maybe I just won't bother.
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, yeah, and on the Christian Zionism front, it's been infuriating to try to explain to people about, to your point about like convert or go to hell. It has been infuriating to try to explain to them that like so much of the money that goes into funding the like goes into lobbying Congress to continue to pass the like billions of dollars of aid is specifically coming from like evangelical Christians who are fine with the, you know, they want to see conflict in the Holy Land because to them it means that the end times may be coming and they may finally it may be their lifetime that Jesus comes in. And frankly that then makes them like, sorry, two different tangents here. One, I was writing a piece about protests about land being sold in East Jerusalem, and how they were, you know, not anti-Semitic protests, and yet so many people interpreted it that way, why that was. And the author of one of the like the worst articles about it, one of the most that like fundamentally misframed it, someone who worked as part of the Israel lobby, and specifically, oh, I'm trying to remember what the Christian Zionist front. I'm trying to remember why it was relevant. I guess just to say that like so much of the narrative, even the narrative that Jewish people are told, is still being fundamentally framed in a way that it is meant to. Right, that's what it was. He like apologized for Steve Bannon. He like it did a lot of Steve Bannon apologia, which if you're not familiar, is a very anti-Semitic person. But this kind, like, you know, talking about once again the like red flags of when I posted that PragerU article, like they I wish it was easier to get people to see the red flags of the people you are agreeing with hate you. Like the people that are on your side do not care about your salvation, about your liberation. Um, yeah, it's very demoralizing on that
They're
front.
using you.
Yeah.
One thing I would love to turn us to in a way is the topic of Zionism within the tabletop RPG space, because this panel came together in the context of that space. And I think there's a lot of things we could talk about. We were briefly talking about the boycott, the big bad boycott before we started recording. We don't have to talk about the boycott here, but I think it's a recent example of forces of Zionism at work in the space. So yeah, I kind of wanted to ask like where you all have identified Zionism at work, how it's at work, and what we can do about that, how we can be vocal opponents and really like make anti-Zionist spaces within the space itself.
Oh, yeah, what a time that was. Yeah, for those of you who are watching and don't know, the Big Five boycott was organized by Esther and also my partner, Hamna Shahid. And so I was in the background of a lot of that in terms of what was going on. And wow, it was a bad time finding out a lot of things about a lot of people and a lot of organizations that we were relying on and we had supported financially, ideologically, otherwise. It makes it difficult to navigate this space. And this space, this isn't new, to be clear. This has been, uh, I mean, in terms of like tabletop space, in terms of tabletop games in general, stemming from war gaming, it was inherent in, the original Dungeons and Dragons and how that has evolved and everything, and how all of these ideologies from Zionism to racism and sexism, all of these things that are wrapped up in all of these wargaming fundamentals have just kind of been brushed off. So the more games that get made that originate from this point of wargaming, the more it just gets sort of like swept under the rug, or just like, oh, this is just how it is. It comes from this. And I'm like, well, okay, but let's look at where that comes from, perhaps. And that's the big thing. And so now we see all these games come out where you look at them and you're just like, well, you said you had sensitivity consultants, and I'm not going to name any names right now. But sometimes things come out and it's just like, huh, it doesn't seem like you thought about this very critically, or like, I don't understand why you would make this the setting, or you would, I don't know, if you make a game about punching Nazis, maybe you should really, really think about what you're saying in that game. It has to be a little more nuanced. It needs to be pretty staunchly about punching Nazis. And for me personally, as somebody who works with quite a lot of people in this space as a marketer, I do have to go to my clients and be like, hey, you know that this is happening right now. It is pretty imperative for me to work with you, but also just from a standpoint of people wanting to support you, that you say something about this and that you can show that like you are not part of the problem. You need to not be part of the problem. I mean, I wouldn't be working with these people if I thought that they were not capable of being decent human beings. But it's not enough to just quietly be like, oh, well, yeah, that sucks. I'm like, no, you need to say that on social media right now, actually. And so that's part of what I have been doing for the past few years in terms of like when I work with people, of just being like, hey, I know that you're working for X company, or like you're collaborating with whoever. I'm going to ask you to either cut ties with them, or I'm going to ask you to make your own statement and put either this relationship on the line, or I'm going to ask you to like really filter out the people that you're working with. And it's just something that you need to do. And I shouldn't have to point that out to you, but that is a role that I sometimes have to have, just from people who are not, acutely aware of what it feels like to be in this position, or in worse positions in the like wake of this genocide. Like, there are just so many people who are not thinking, they may be donating, they may be supporting, they may be doing everything that they can, but they're still not doing enough. And sometimes it's just like, well, I need you to, like, if your career hinges on being public, you need to be able to show people that they can support you in this way, that you are very staunchly anti-genocide. And I hate that that has to be a thing that I have to tell clients. I hate that that is the reality that we're in. But that's where we are in the tabletop space right now, because it's always kind of been there. It's always been bubbling under the surface. You can look at so many games. You can look, I'm sure that you can look at a number of actual plays as well and be like, actually, this is maybe not good, actually. And now that that's kind of been, not that people haven't been going in and sort of reworking how we think about it. Actually, my undergraduate capstone was going into D&D and completely looking into reworking how like the races are done because of, and I'm going back into like the history of, yeah, where do these come from? Where are these harmful stereotypes blended into all of these things? And I just remember how confused everybody was. They're like, oh, what, really? I'm like, yeah, because it's so normal to you guys. And that's the part of the problem. And now that we've had this bubble sort of burst in this space, now we have these circles that we overlap with that are just very Zionist and very open about it. And that's the scary part, is that now it's not just bubbling under the surface and we're all just like, oh, well, I didn't know. We know. We know now. It's at this point, it's you can't not know. And now we're in this scary and annoying position of, oh, we have these people who just support genocide in this particular space, and this is our livelihoods, or it's our hobbies, it's where we found community, and now it's sort of, for a lot of people, it's been torn apart, and that's really hard. And I've been talking about this a lot, so if everyone else has any thoughts.
I would love to jump in on that. The two things that you really made me think a lot about. One, there's a concept, and now I'm forgetting the name of the book it's from, but it's about the little Nazis. These are the people who were not explicitly bigoted, but who had this like go along to get along mentality, and that was most of Germany. Certainly, at the very least, when like the Nazis rose to power, they were just people who thought, I will be fine if I am silent. And like when you're talking about these people who like are not willing to make a statement, who are not willing to speak out, like that is fundamentally exactly what the little Nazis did. On the subject of bigotry in games, this is kind of how I got like a following in this space in the first place. Like there's a bitter irony about how a lot of the bigotry that's encoded into Western fantasy media is predominantly anti-Semitic and anti-Roma, I would say, are the two. And it just has to do with like what minority groups were in Europe at the time that this folklore was being developed. But there's this great essay, it's called like Knockers, Knackers, Ghosts in the Mine, something like that, that is specifically talks about how there is this like cultural guilt about exiling Jewish people from Britain, and that metastasizes into this belief that there are Jewish ghost miners in like the Cornish mines because there are these like abandoned villages because Jews were kicked out hundreds of years ago. One other brief tangent on that front about the word. Goblins have been one of the oldest, truest, most consistent sources of literally following the origin of the word goblin. You can trace it back to the downfall of the Phrygian Empire in 800 or so BC, and this conflict between the cult of Caberoi, which is like it's I'm trying to think of it's a folk tradition that includes some elements of early Yahwism that is the result of other cultural like mixing, but ultimately results in a belief in like mountain spirits and forest spirits and water spirits that gets taken on by the Greek people who are experiencing the Phrygians as, you know, a diasporic people, and they use it as a metaphor for their, number one, the fact that they're being sold into servitude and like their subjugation, and then secondarily as a metaphor for their how they are like their desperation, how they are destitute and, you know, greedy and willing to do anything to get ahead. Once again, these are refugees who are showing up with nothing because the place that they live just disappeared. And like you can say that is so divorced from the modern reality, but it's not, right? Look at how goblins are used as cannon fodder in games. Look at how games treat some, like I will use the term racist because that's what they use. I think it's horrible that they use the term racist as an aside. It is so plain to, I mean, okay, I could talk about this literally forever. So this is the last one. Like the difference between dwarves and dark elves only exists because of the composer. Oh my God, he's the horribly Wagner. So Wagner in composing Der Ring des Nibelungen, which is the source for Lord of the Rings, creates this differentiation between the dark elves and dwarves that never existed before. They were the same thing. And he creates it ostensibly because he wants to be able to be racist and anti-Semitic and needs separate caricatures to do that with in the context. And like, you can say that, like, Tolkien himself said that he wasn't trying to be anti-Semitic, but he also had to issue several apologies for making short, hairy, cantankerous, gold-obsessed people a part of his fictional reality. Like, yeah, was it poison tree bears poison fruit? Like, yeah, I will get off my soapbox for now.
I want you back on that soapbox later because I want to read these things.
Absolutely.
But on my end, as far as the TTRPG community goes, obviously we have seen a lot of people showing their asses and showing their whatever the opposite of asses is. Like, certain breakfast foods that I once admired and now absolutely avoid at all costs. But honestly, I understand that for some people, this is your full-time job. This is how you make your money. And I understand that it is difficult. I understand that it is not comfortable to have to sacrifice opportunities for the sake of, like publicly declaring your anti-Zionism. But I also need to ask, is that worth it? Is it really worth, especially for the pittances we make in this industry, right? Is it really worth and like I know for some people, $20 means everything. I do get that. And I do recognize again, like I am coming from a place of privilege where like this is not my day job. I do have another source of income, but I personally cannot stomach the idea of aligning myself with someone who is openly Zionist for the sake of that $20. And to quote, actually something that I think was said in the Big Bad server, the purpose of protest is to make people uncomfortable. It can be really as simple as, for example, I don't use Facebook, but I did go on Facebook like at some point last year. I just slapped a watermelon in my bio and moved on. On Twitter, on Blue Sky, I do have in my pinned posts like, "Hey, I am an anti-Zionist," and at one point that wasn't necessarily something that we would have had to specifically call out because we would hope that everyone that you're going to work with, when they say like you are, pro Black Lives Matter, pro LGBT, etc., you'd think that anti-bigotry would include, being pro-Palestine, being anti-Zionist. Apparently that's not necessarily a thing. So that is unfortunately something that now we have to specifically call out. There are two situations in which I will side-eye someone. If I see, well, okay, one where I will side-eye them, one where I will just never work with them. Obviously, I will not work with someone who's like, "Yeah, Israel, let's go." No, fuck that. If you just have not said anything about Palestine, about Gaza, even if it was just, "I'm anti-Zionist," or "I think Israel's doing a shitty ass thing," I am going to question, at best, complacency, at worst, support. And that is something that I have found, like, I look for this now. Like, if I'm considering working with someone new, I will look for any mentions of Israel, of Gaza, of Palestine, of this genocide that is happening. And I feel like this has changed the landscape both in such a small way, but also in such a big way where this is now something everybody looks for. This is something that has taken down some brands. Again, certain breakfast foods, like most people never gonna touch them again. And it costs so little to just stand up against Zionism. Just say, "I don't support it." Even if it's just one sentence, that's fine. Just make it clear that you do not support it.
I think that to your point there, like, it's really interesting to see. It's become kind of a microcosm of the larger conversation where like the okay, if the grognards are agreeing with you, you fucked up. If like if the people who are talking about burying sensitivity readers alive think that you have a good point, evaluate everything you just said.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have a lot I could say on this topic, and I'm kind of figuring out what I want to say in this moment. Yeah, I'll go for some things. So, if you don't know why the Big Bad Boycott started, essentially Big Bad Con asked a panel that was going to be on Jewish perspectives in TTRPGs, that was going to have a statement as part of the panel description disowning, decrying, saying what's happening is fucked up. And I believe the phrase from the river to the sea was in there, and maybe something about anti-Zionism. Now my brain has become so flooded with all the memories of it that I'm like, well, what was in it? But I know from the river to the sea was in there.
Was it the thing where they asked panelists to be like, confirm that they are anti-Zionist?
That too, but essentially the con came back and was like, we don't really want you to say some of this. You can say some things, but take other things out because they'll make people mad. We would later learn that they had also removed pro-Palestinian statements from the bios of other people, so it was not just this panel. But I was given word of this, and initially I had kind of a lot going on, and I was like, I don't know how I feel about this, but I got a lot going on. I told both of my partners about it. Shout out to the partners in all of this, by the way. Gwen, Alex, Faye, thank you. And I was like, you know what? Hamna and I were working together on something else at the time, and I trusted Hamna. I trust Hamna. And I was like, I really feel like this person is aligned with my values, my thoughts. I'm just gonna run it by him and see what she says. And I'm so glad I did that, because it would snowball from there. And I will link things where you can read about how it snowballed. And I guess what I have to say about all of the ways it got wild is that it was so insightful to me, because I feel like we were not asking for that much. Like, Hamna and I haven't really talked about this publicly, but we spent a lot of time thinking about what we wanted to ask for in that boycott, and what was going to be an ask too far that we would probably never get, that we thought was totally reasonable, but we were just probably never going to get. And we were like, you know what, we'll send them an easy one. Like, these 3 things are so easy to do. Like, they can just do them immediately. And the fight we had to fight to get that, I was like, there are such strong currents of Zionism in this space that I was aware of, but that I am now aware of in a new way. And I guess I'll invoke something dangerous in a way, because it involves money. And when we talk about money and Jews, there's a lot there. But I think when we talk about money in the TTRPG space, a lot of things happen because of who has the money, whether that's a dragon company that we shan't go into too much detail about, whether that's a con and people who are donating to a con, and therefore the con is worried about maybe pissing them off. I'm not sure that that's what was going on, but I have my suspicions that a lot of what resistance we met with maybe had to do with money, and maybe had to do with the image and getting long-term support. I don't have solid proof of that, so don't expect me to throw it in a Google Doc, but it's a strong suspicion I have. And so I was just like, there's a lot to contend with here, and there are a lot of people I'm so grateful to who will publicly put their name on something and say, I am anti-Zionist, I am anti this genocide, I am pro-Palestine. And there are a lot of people who will slide into your DMs who are pretty well known in the space, being like, I think you should not do this. And I'm not going to name names, though I am really want to. I'm not going to name names, but that happened. There were a lot of people who were like, I think you're wasting your time. I think you should keep your kindling dry for the fights that matters. You know who you are. And I think what I'm trying to get to after rambling for a long time is it really, really brought an awareness to me of how many people there are in this space who will do that. And I guess if I had an ask for everybody, it's just keep speaking up, keep acting up, keep making it unacceptable to hold those views in public, and to act in ways that support them. Yeah, that's my spiel.
If I could just jump in to add one thing about Big Bad Con specifically, like Big Bad Con was never going to be the big tabletop role playing game convention. It was much beloved as a small place where people who are like progressive, who are leftists, who care about like disability advocacy, who care about not getting COVID because COVID is still real and has been disabling and will continue to be disabling for as long as it exists. And so to have that kind of space compromised by like colonialist, bigoted, racist nonsense was a like heartbreaking moment for many people in the community.
I mean, it was certainly jarring, I think, because it was it was that space for a lot of people, and a lot of people were introduced to that space as that way. And I think the very unfortunate thing is that it was never going to be that because it never started that way. It, which I don't know if everybody knows about, but sometimes people form little groups that don't have very good ideologies and decide that they want to make something a little bit bigger. And when it gets bigger, sometimes, better things come in, but it still originates from that shitty little group. And I think the unfortunate reality is that just a lot of people didn't see that coming and or didn't remember, or that circle was large enough where everybody else just didn't know. And so this sort of implosion of the BadCon was just a really, really unfortunate case of a lot of people did not consider that this might come back to being what it originally was, which is just a bunch of people who don't have great ideologies decided to make an organization of some kind and cover it up along the way, which just really, really unfortunate.
And like, I do believe in the big bad con general message of like minorities come here to network to be safe. I I read through all of the documentation that Esther and Hamna put together, so big thank you for that. I did have a couple of acquaintances and friends on staff that I spoke to because I was confused because I was like Big Bad's always been so so good at promoting this stuff, like what's going on? And I heard what everyone said, I read what everyone said, and what I kind of ended up sitting with is while I understand the general worry of, well, we don't want to be harassed, when does it stop? Does it stop with Palestine? Does it stop with Zionism? Or does that extend to Black Lives Matter? Does it extend to queer rights? Obviously, we would all like to think, Big Bad has a no tolerance policy for bigotry, for the Zionist ideology and anything adjacent to it. It just, it was very disheartening to not even really have the option to be like, yes, I am okay with this. I want this con that I am attending to have this message out there because this is the whole reason I am specifically taking time out of my year to come to this con. Because it is supposed to be accepting, because it is supposed to be safe. Obviously, when you have, from what I understand, I think it was on Saturday. I wasn't there on the Saturday, but there was a Zionist protester just chilling out in the lobby. Again, I wasn't there. Thank God for that, because I would have not felt safe at all. And like, I do understand when someone is threatening to escalate, things become a little bit dicey. But I just can't help but wonder, would that person have even bothered if it hadn't blown up so big?
And I mean, we all saw the response. Like you said, well, where does it end? And like the excuse of like, oh, well, like we don't want to attract attention. I'm like, you're already attracting attention by boosting marginalized individuals. You have already done that, and your solution was, if there's a problem, call the police. Why? Now let's think for 2 seconds about why that might be a problem. Just 2 seconds. We don't really need to get into that, but there's solutions for anything that they had was laughable, quite frankly. It's just sad to see. And another thing that I just really want to hammer is that I don't, and I hate to be like this, don't think that we haven't noticed just because we've moved platforms, the people that went quiet and then suddenly started talking again. We're not stupid. That's all.
It is an age-old, I say trick, but I guess it is kind of a trick in the TTRPG space specifically, and not exclusive to bigots. Like there are abusers who have done the same thing, go dark, try to find a new community of people who will support their bullshit.
Move platforms.
Yeah, yeah. And just I wanted to name something that I think like all of us have spoken to in different ways, which is like the difference between saying something and acting in service of, like, expressing an ideal and then acting in service of that ideal. I think about it a lot in the context. So there's this book, Pedagogy of the Oppressed, Paulo Freire. It's a great book. Outlines basically he's trying to break down how to dismantle oppression, but he writes it in the form of a Hegelian dialectic. And his peer at the time, Augusto Boal, was like, dude, the people you're writing this for aren't going to be able to understand it. That at the end of the day, they know their experience. Let them tell their story, and I guarantee you it will contain the same ideas that your book does. And he comes up with this idea of theater of the oppressed, this that like letting people tell their stories, and in doing so encode anti-colonialist, anti-capitalist, anti-racist ideas into their like an expression of their own world. And you look to Big Bad Con, you look to a lot of these publishers, they are telling you one thing, but when you watch how they act in the context of the space, they are demonstrating different values.
I think the one last thing I want to say, and people are going to be real mad that I'm saying this, but oh well. When it's a bunch of well-meaning white people starting something for marginalized people, and that is the majority of the group, and you also have people whose allegiance is to whiteness, that's a problem. And it is particularly a problem when that group of primarily well-meaning white people gatekeeps and decides, who is the good marginalized person and who is the troublemaker. And I think we saw and witnessed some very clear examples of that, and examples of the fact that Big Bad Con is in their own mind, a well-meaning space. That it's a bunch of people who mean well, who will say, we mean well, we want to play games, we want to create this space for marginalized people. And yet there are such big gaps in understanding, in ability to relate to things, in just lived experience that fundamentally kind of can't be filled if you're a group of primarily well-meaning white people. To me, that really came home during the boycott, and it really reminded me of the ways that whiteness and Zionism are part of the same project, which is, we could do a whole panel on that too, and the ways that Israel itself is a white supremacist state. So that's just one more link I wanted to make. I know people are going to be mad about that, but be with your feelings.
Juliana Margulies had said a bunch of horrible things on a podcast. But what they really amounted to was her saying that I recognize these systems of oppression that place white people at the top. Don't you want to get more favor from the people further up that ladder? And hey, that's the wrong fucking message to take away from the nature of intersectional marginalization. That is a demonstration that you are a participant in it. I think that is the attitude that so many, the amount of people who are like, we stood with you during BLM, but you won't stand with Israel now. My God.
that that every time that I saw that, particularly stung as a Black Jewish person, it was always like, man, you don't know what you're talking about at all.
Yeah. I'm friends with several folks who specifically organize in Jewish people of color spaces, and this really pernicious link between where the funding comes from for those orgs and Zionism, and the idea that there is an extent to which another way in which white supremacy comes into play is, and I know once again, Jewishness is not a source of money or maliciousness in its use, but Zionism certainly is both of those things, and that is fundamentally tied back to the white supremacy as a method of accruing power. That is the reality, and it has tremendous ability to stifle progress in rhetoric and action.
I do wish I'd said this right in the beginning of this, but I'm going to say it now because I think it is worth saying. During all of our intros, you heard that I don't think any of us knew to be anti-Zionist growing up. It is not too late to change your perspective. It is not too late to go and get educated. When I finish up with these sentences, I'm going to ask David very nicely if he'll share some resources. I both with the perspective of Big Bad Con and anybody else who has spoken out against anti-Zionism or even holds those kinds of beliefs. And I swear I am not coming at this from a, holier than thou perspective. I am genuinely saying this. It is not too late to change your perspective and go educate yourself. I do not believe that anyone is beyond, I hate saying like beyond reach or and that kind of thing, but like that's kind of what I mean. I think that it is never too late to change your perspective, to educate yourself. It's not comfortable. Again, like coming from someone who grew up in a family that was very pro-Israel, very like I will look for any Jewish person that I can find in X, Y, and Z room and I will gravitate towards them and only talk to them, that kind of thing. It is not too late to change that. I believe in, restorative justice over punitive justice. I obviously cannot speak for anybody else in this room because ultimately, between all of us, between our various marginalized identities, we don't owe anybody anything. I personally believe in the restorative nature. I believe in second chances. If you have learned anything, or even if you have been inspired to learn anything from our conversation today, I do want to highlight, like, come talk to me. Like, I promise I'm not gonna be an asshole. I promise I'm not gonna like beat you around the head and be like, how the fuck dare you? Like, we all start somewhere, and that includes anyone who needs to kind of move away from that mindset. It's not too late. Even if you're an adult, even if you're 80, come talk to me.
You're welcome to talk to me too. People think I'm really mean. I promise I'm not. If you come to my DMs and are like, I want to learn, I really want to help you learn. I promise. I would love that. Yeah. I guess we've been going for a while now. And so I kind of wanted to ask a question in closing, which I think dovetails really, really well with this, which is what are some anti-Zionist resources for Jews and for anybody that have been really meaningful to you in your life, in your work, in your learning? The website for me, Decolonize Palestine, is a great place to start that I often just link folks because it has a lot of really easy, accessible learning, at least for me. Yeah, and I'm of course blanking on like every resource I usually give people. But if y'all have some, please feel welcome to chime in.
Jewish Voice for Peace is a really good one. And I say this with a grain of salt. Do not do this unless you know the person very, very well and have already talked to them about this. Your Palestinian friends. Like, obviously, I am not saying go out and ask a Palestinian to spend emotional labor on you. But if you come across someone who either online who is like, hey, I want to share my experience, talk to them. The best way to learn about the dangers and the harms that Zionism has caused is to talk to somebody who is willing to share their experience with it.
I have so many. I mean, I think Jewish Voice for Peace is great. I think that if not now, very much works to be, frankly, a bridge between like Zionism and non-Zionism or anti-Zionism. I have mixed feelings about that, but I think that they exist in part to do that. I read a lot, whether it's Shal Magid's Necessity of Exile, Ilan Pappé, 10 Myths About Israel, whether it's, I mean, Ta-Nehisi Coates' recent book, I have not read, but I've heard exceptional things. Naomi Klein's Doppelganger, if I had to recommend a single, you're going to pick up one book or one audiobook, I listen to it as an audiobook. She does a great deal of quoting from Jewish voices, anti-Zionist Jewish voices throughout history, because we have been here since well before Israel's founding, since Zionism as an idea was being expressed for the first time. Rosa Luxemburg said something like, "What do you want with like these special Jewish pains?" I feel as close to I have the quote here now. I feel as close to the wretched victims of rubber plantations in Putumayo and the Black people in Africa whose bodies the Europeans play catch with. I have no special corner in my heart for the ghetto. I am at home in the entire world where there are clouds and birds and human tears. There are people who have fundamentally understood the universal nature of oppression and therefore liberation, and many of them have, to my great pride, have been Jewish. And that book does a really great job at compiling sources. I recommend it very, very highly. And also, I will echo what other folks have said. Come talk to me. I will share resources. There's a great quote. So I'm 12 years sober, and I generally AA sucks, but there's one quote I heard that I quote often. Someone said, "When you are trying to get out of Dodge, or when you're running through hell, and flames are looking up around you, you can save your face or you can save your ass, but you can't save both." There's a reason I started with that story about PragerU. It is time to say grass.
I personally am not going to have a lot of resources for you. As I explained, I'm in a very weird space where I am both here with everybody and also learning. So thank you for the recommendations. I'll be reading a lot of this. I need audiobooks because my dyslexia is very bad. But one thing I will say, as somebody sort of at the cross section of this topic and tabletop RPG spaces, if you are new to this space and are despaired by the fact that parts of it are not great, it might be a strange journey, but maybe do actually go check out the Big Bad Con boycott site and see just how many people are loud. See how many people are here to support you as you would support them, and are very staunchly anti-genocide. As somebody who experienced it while it was happening, as we all did, it was really heartening to see people stand up, to see companies stand up, even kind of blown away by some of that. And so that's what I leave specifically for new people coming into the space. If for whatever reason this is one of the first things that you're seeing coming into the space because it's important to you, thank you. And please know that you are not alone. There are so many resources and there are so many wonderful people here. I am maybe not the person to go to for information about this, but if you're having a weird time, I'm also having a weird time, so we can commiserate and we can learn together.
I will add one more thing. The podcast Popular Cradle. It is on Spotify. I believe it's on Apple Podcasts now. It is hosted by Palestinians talking about the history of Palestine, the various colonial powers, and all of the systems of power that are invested in colonizing Palestine and Palestinian liberation. And I just wanted to shout that out as like another resource and a podcast resource if folks want to listen. So that's Popular Cradle.
On that front of a listening resource, Jacobin's podcast, The Dig, did a really exceptional, like 6-part in-depth history on the like founding of Israel as a state and the prior. And sorry, my dog. If you want really in-depth historical analysis, I cannot think of a better source.
Y'all, I feel like we could go for hours more and still have so much more to talk about. And I know all of our bodies have been here for a while, so I will invite us to draw this particular conversation to a close, maybe leaving hopes that the possibility there will be another one down the line. So yeah, I just wanted to invite you all to please shout out where we can find you on the internet and what your current projects are or old projects that you want people to check out. Gwen, if you want to start us off.
I've been Gwen or Lecto, she, her. You can find me on the internet at Glitchy Pixie on Blue Sky, or you could just go to my website, glitchypixie.com. You can see all the work that I have done across performance, design, marketing, all the stuff that I just released a micro setting, microzine for the Tiny Worlds RPG Jam with my partner Hamna. It's rather esoteric. Please check it out. It's pretty cool. And also keep an eye on my Blue Sky as I will be releasing a lot more games coming up soon. So that's cool. And some other projects that I can't talk about yet. So that'll be cool and fun. Also, I plug this every time. If you haven't checked out Goodia yet, you should check it out on YouTube. I did the marketing for that, but please heed the content warnings. But if you haven't checked it out, it will change the way you think about actual play. So I will pass it on down.
I'm everywhere online at David Jones Kraus. If you find me on Blue Sky or on TikTok for however long we have that left, I think I added it to my Red Note profile as well. My Linktree has a link to Tarek's GoFundMe campaign where you can donate to help him and his family set up a generator and fences and stuff as they start to sift through the wreckage of their lives. I am currently working on, as I said before, a Delicious in Dungeon themed OSR. It is going to be both a game that I'm honestly really proud of. It's also going to be a recipe book with the goal that it will feature recipes that can be made with ingredients that can be found in America's food deserts, because food scarcity is like kind of at the heart of that show, if you're familiar with it. And it's something that so many people face. It is, I think that food has, I was raised in, culturally, a tenet of cultural Judaism has always been for me that like food is love, that it is an extension of oneself, it is an extension of one's own care for other people. And I think that everyone deserves the opportunity to both give and receive that care. This project is a great passion of mine for that reason. So please do check it out. It will be on all my socials when we are kickstarting. I will pass it to Jen.
First off, matzo ball soup is just, ooh, fucking love it. Anyway, hi, I'm Jen. I can be found on pretty much all the places on the internet at Jenberb. That is JIENBIRB. If you cannot find me under that name, that means I am not on that platform. Other than that, I spend most of my time over on Girls Run These Worlds doing, production, performance, project management, overlay design. I wear a lot of hats. I am looking for more hats to wear. I do a lot of like floating producer work. So if you need a producer, hit me up. I am most easily contactable on Blue Sky and Discord. Other than that, I sometimes like to sit in bed and cuddle my cats and also play Dark Souls. And that's me. Over to Esther.
Yay! All right, I'm Esther. I shouted out Chromythica, our Pathfinder 2e actual play earlier, but you can check out Chromythica at chromythica.com. All of our stuff is linked there. And I guess my other big project right now is actually this channel. So if you want to watch other stuff on this channel, that would be really cool. More stuff is going to be coming out, actual play, interviews, panels, hopefully media criticism soon. So I'm very excited about that. Thank you all so much for being here. This has been a really, really wonderful conversation. I hope we can continue it sometime. And thank you to whoever is tuning in for being with us, for listening, hopefully having something to take away. See y'all soon.